The number one question I get is, which machine should I buy? And it's super confusing. I totally get it. I've been there. There are more brands that you can count on your two hands, and each of them have like a million models to choose from. This makes it super tough to compare brand to brand, model to model, and honestly, sometimes the thought of how much work that is enough for people to just give up right there. But it's all good, because I've done the work for you. I also want to say this video isn't sponsored by any brand, so there's no backdoor deals happening here. They're all my own opinions because I actually want to give y'all real advice. So I did my own research, I vetted through different brands and models, and I've also asked y'all on Instagram what is the best sewing machine for beginners. Got a ton of good answers, but I also had to try them out for myself. And now I think I've found it. The Singer 4423 to me is the best machine for beginners. And that goes against some heavy hitters like Brother and Janome, but each of them have their own strengths, which is why I wouldn't recommend the 4423 to everyone. So let me share with you why I think they all deserve their flowers. First, let's dial it back to the beginning. Now, to kick it off, we really can't make informed decisions without the data. On March 26, I dropped a survey and asked my followers for advice. Share with me your sewing machine wisdom. I read through all the responses and definitely found some gems of advice. But then I also filtered by those who had the most sewing experience, which some had over 10 years. Then I tried to find people who have also used various machines in their past. And here's what they said. The most cost-effective sewing machine for beginners is going to be the Singer 443 sewing machine. I would get FS or I would get any. It's going to be the most cost-effective. I've only ever sewn on Juki, TL, Singer 6000 QI. Okay. It was a lot of information, but I summarized all the input and essentially boils down to Brother, Singer, and Janome. Those were the top 3 most recommended brands. Brother had 20% of the votes, Singer had 17.9%, and then Janome had 15.8% of the votes. Now these are all votes from real people who have sewn for years. Some were way too expensive for a beginner, which brings up a good point. Price. Let's eliminate all the machines over $300. So we'll rule out this, and this. This leaves us with 2 recommendations from Singer, 3 from Janome, and 4 within Brother. So let's start the comparison. But in case you're brand new to sewing, let's do a quick 60-second overview of how a sewing machine works. You start with your thread, and this goes in the spool pin, which is locked by the spool pin cap. We're gonna wind that thread onto a bobbin, and it holds our bottom thread. Once it's wound, it then gets placed underneath the throat plate. Going back to the top, we're gonna pull the thread through the machine. It finally gets threaded through the needle. Once those 2 are set up, we can then create stitches. Now the feed dogs are underneath the throat plate, and they're what pull your fabric through with the help of the presser foot, which is above, and it keeps 2 or more layers together. Now with every sewing machine, there are gonna be dials to adjust based on the project fabrics you're working with. For example, the stitch length and tension. The thicker the fabric means longer stitches and tighter tension. Thin fabric means short stitches and loose tension. General sewing would probably have a tension of 4 and a length of 2.5 millimeters. So you could start there with most projects and then test out those stitches on scrap material to adjust. And then finally, you also want to decide on your stitch type. Some come exclusively with a straight stitch, but more commonly now you'll get a variety like zigzag stitch, buttonhole stitch, decorative stitches, or stretch stitches. And so let's get into the fun part. Let's talk about some brands, machines that you voted on. We got a lot of recos for Brother. However, I eliminated some of the computerized models because there's typically a more affordable counterpart in mechanical form. And I want to show you models that you can get a little bit more bang for your buck. Now, first up is the Brother XR3774, and it's priced at $250, so it fits within our budget. And it comes with 37 built-in stitches, which means you'll have more than enough for your basic sewing. But we're gonna take a deeper dive into looking at the unique features that really sets this Brother machine apart from the other 2. This brother machine has a quick set top drop-in bobbin setup. And what that means is you don't have to drop the bobbin thread by hand. And when you're setting up the upper thread, it's pretty standard to the other machines, except what I found interesting was that there's a mark on the hand wheel. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because when you thread your machine, you want the needle in the utmost position by turning the hand wheel. So this marking when turned to 12 o'clock tells you that the needle is now at its peak. It's definitely a small design aspect that I just think it's pretty thoughtful. It also comes with an automatic needle threader. Some other features, there's an adjustable spool pin for your thread, plus a second one for sewing with 2 spools, which just fits on the bobbin spool pin, and you'll need it if you're sewing with a twin needle. But what was interesting was both spools were vertical, which could be maybe one of the drawbacks because there's no option for a horizontal spool pin. I tried looking on the machine for another port that fits the second spool pin horizontally somewhere, but I couldn't find any. And if not, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but in my other video, I did share why you should use a horizontal versus a vertical spool pin, depending on your thread. Will it make a difference? I doubt it, but if we're being super technical, that was just something I noticed. But even if there was a port for this spool pin to go horizontally, the pin they gave wasn't even long enough to put a pin cap to keep the spool from falling off. So it probably wouldn't work anyways. In any case, you could set up 2 spools of thread to run a twin needle, also known as a double needle, that they provided with this machine. What this does is it can create 2 parallel stitches at the same time to imitate a cover stitch like you might see on the hem of t-shirts or jeans. And the beauty of this is that these stitches are perfectly matching and it creates a stretch stitch, which is necessary for sewing fabrics with stretch like knit. It's very useful, but most machines do come with 2 spool pins, and buying a twin needle is pretty affordable, around $8, so it's not a complete game changer. But on top of this double needle setup, they do also give you a walking foot. And a walking foot is useful because it keeps the layers together. Normally you just have the feed dogs feed the fabric through, but because it's only on the bottom, there's a chance that the fabric on top shifts. By having a walking foot to help feed the fabric from above, it helps prevent the top layer from getting pushed ahead of the bottom layer. The sewing machine also comes with a DVD instruction manual, but I don't have a CD drive on my laptop to watch this, so kind of useless. But the manual that they did provide is very detailed with guides on not just how to use a sewing machine, but on how to do certain stitches. The flatbed storage compartment, it's a cubby, but there's no wall, so it seems kind of lousy because you have to keep your supplies in some kind of baggie, otherwise I think it would just fall out. Some other remarks, the presser foot lever is on the inside, not on the back. And what I think you should look for is when the presser foot lever is at its peak, does it have room to go even higher for that extra lift? And this will help if you're dealing with some thick materials. And there's a darning plate attachment so that you can darn. But I think most machines you could just disengage the sewing feed dogs. This table extension is very useful for quilters, especially larger projects. Gives you more surface area, which keeps the fabric level versus falling off the edge. However, it's not necessary for sewing clothes, but it's still nice to have. And I wouldn't be able to compare this review without talking about the case. Like, Brother's case is solid. It's got a tough exterior. Not that you need this much protection, but it is a plus. A lot of people recommended the heavy duty series by Singer, but there are a lot of different models underneath that series, so I chose the 2 most affordable ones. So we have the 4411, which is the most basic model under the heavy duty series. And then we have the 4423 model, which I've been using for the past 7 years at home. Besides the difference in color and dials, both feature a cubby system that you don't have to keep the little accessories in a bag. And they both have double spool pins, one being horizontal and long enough for a spool pin cap. So it's a plus. And if you're interested in darning, there's a button you can push at the back of the free arm to disengage or drop the feed dogs to darn. What was interesting is the amount of, or lack thereof, user manual material in the box. It was substantially less because Singer encourages you to view their Get Started manual online versus on paper or DVD. Regarding the machine, they both have that extra lift on the presser foot, albeit not as high as the Brother machine, but still has some extra lift. Something that the Brother didn't have though is a dial to adjust the presser foot pressure, which is, in my opinion, very helpful for working with a wide range of fabrics. They're essentially the same machine with slightly different features, so it might be tough to justify why to spend more on the more expensive model. So I can give you my advice on why I would pick the 4423 model. The 4411 has 11 stitches, just like the name, and then the 4423 has 23 stitches, like the name as well. The 4423 has more stitches and specific stitches designed to work with knit, called stretch stitches. There's also an automatic needle threader on the 4423, which the 4411 does not have. But the main reason that I would take the 4423 over the 4411 is because of the automatic buttonhole feature done in one swift push of the pedal. By plugging in a button in the buttonhole sewing foot, the sewing machine automatically makes buttonholes at the perfect size based on your button. And it does this the same size every single time. With the 4411 base model, it's a more manual process, as there's 4 steps you have to do. You have to measure the buttonhole length yourself based on the button you have. You have to switch and control the stitch type 4 times to get each of those 4 stitches. And this process, while it still works and creates great buttonholes, the quality is kind of dependent on the sewist. The automatic buttonhole feature is a major relief. It guarantees you get the right size buttonhole for the button that you choose every single time consistently, and it still fits within the $300 budget. For Janome, there were 2 top recommendations that were pretty comparable: the Arctic Crystal, which was $200, and the Janome 234, which is an entry-level machine, also $200. But I couldn't actually get my hands on the Janome 234, but there seems to be a comparable Janome model, which was the 2212. Now, I've read reviews that this model can handle thicker material, which is needed for sewing heavyweight fabric like denim for jeans or canvas for bags and accessories. So we're off to a good start. And the cubby system is like a 2 out of 3. It's not as bad as the Brother, but it's not as good as the Singer. Noticeably, in the packaging, there was also less accessories. One noticeable trait was the front-loading bobbin system. The bobbin is what holds your bottom thread, but in this case, it's housed in this metal casing which then attaches to your machine. And for some reason, it was a bit challenging to get the bobbin out. Machines initially came out with front-loading bobbins until top-loading bobbins were invented, and that became the new standard. They say front-loading bobbins can hold more thread, but top-loading bobbins usually have a clear case, so you can see through it and know when you're running out of thread. But for those reasons, plus all of this, I'd probably choose a top-loading bobbin. This machine also has 2 spool pins, but for them, it's 2 adjustable ones, which I kind of like better. You'll never lose that additional pin because it's integrated into the machine. Anytime a feature is integrated into the machine instead of being an attachment that you could lose is always going to be better. But kind of notice one was a little bit more smooth than the other for the Janome versus the Brother. And another thing that was just kind of weird is when you're winding the bobbin, you have to pull the hand wheel out and then go through the usual steps of winding a bobbin, spin, something, and then push the hand wheel back in to disengage that bobbin winder. Some other things to point out: there is a non-LED light, which actually doesn't feel bright enough for me, as I'm pretty used to the LED brightness and color. If you're interested in darning, it does have the ability to drop the feed dog instead of needing a little accessory, but some of the bigger drawbacks: there's no automatic needle threader, so that could be a no-no for some people. The buttonhole creation is, again, that 4-step process instead of being automatic. And we checked the presser foot. Does it have that extra high lift for thicker materials? No. Can you adjust the presser foot pressure? No. Now, looking at all 3 models, All of them check off the boxes for my general sewing machine criteria, aka must-have features. They have that free arm capability for sleeves and hems. They have a straight stitch. They also have zigzag and buttonhole stitches. And on the plus side, they all come with stretch stitching for knit. So it's all good stuff. All of them come with an assortment of accessories to sew a range of items. Brother coming with a few more, Singer also having a solid amount, Janome being on the light side. So let's get into the real pros and cons that separate these models. Where Brother excels is it has 37 built-in stitches, which is a lot, and it comes with a good amount of accessories like the walking foot and the twin needle. We can find some good value in that wide table, especially if you're a quilter, and that hard case, while it's not crazy important, it does feel like you're getting your money's worth from this purchase. And that quick set bobbin drop in was very simple to use. Where the Brother has some drawbacks, the storage system or cubby system doesn't really perform that well. I don't really like to have a storage unit but then have to open a Ziploc bag of my accessories. The darning plate attachment is something that you'll have to never lose if you want to darn, and can't adjust the presser foot pressure. So it kind of limits you a little bit on sewing different materials, not for sure. But for Singer, the 4423, the pros, the heavy duty line is so well prepared for heavy duty, heavyweight projects that I think it's great. And it does have that lighter range as well. It has an adjustable presser foot pressure, which I think helps for dealing with different weights of fabrics. Not many cons for the Singer, which I just feel like it's a pretty well-rounded machine for a beginner when you don't really know what you're gonna sew, but you kind of want the capabilities to sew everything. And then for the Janome, the pros, aesthetically, I kind of like the look of this machine the most, and it does have that double spool pin built into the machine. But where Janome lacks, a few accessories like the button presser foot, there's just not as much as the other models. The non-LED lighting just doesn't feel like enough lighting for me. Having been used to doing LED for years, switching to non-LED is kind of a deal breaker for me. And this front loading bobbin, I'm not a huge fan of it. Doesn't make it as easy, and I feel like I could run into a lot more problems. The biggest concern for me was not having that automatic buttonhole creator, and for me that's a big deal because you just get quality consistent buttonholes made every time, and having to do that manually just doesn't add up. Overall, felt like I was working with what felt like an older machine, like this model wasn't innovated to modern day. So those are kind of the cons. If you're going for style, then I would say Janome wins. They've got discrete labels, and the sewing machine overall has this like old school retro look to it. But if you're going for functionality, then it's hard to ignore the capabilities of the Singer heavy duty line, especially because their machines have so much versatility. It's just such a solid option. On the other hand, if you like the bells and whistles, you really want to feel like you're getting value out of your purchase, then Brother's the one to go with. The machine itself is great. It's got 37 stitches, extra wide table, sturdy case, and a lot of extra accessories. You really feel like you're getting your money's worth. Okay, so now part 4, the testing phase. This is what I've been waiting for because I couldn't give advice without trying them out myself. First up, we got the tote bag DIY. So this is a classic design, and I've added a small welt-sized pocket for your phone for easy access. And this will really test the machine's strength on if it can sew through heavyweight woven fabric. Now the tote bag is one of my favorite sewing projects to recommend to beginners because it's relatively easy. It's got a simple shape, 4 panels plus the straps, and you can make it as challenging as you want. You could sew a basic tote bag with no pocket, or if you feel like you want something a little bit different, challenge yourself to that welt pocket. I like using this DIY kit as something to test these machines because 1, it's a beginner project and these are beginner machines, so I want to know how compatible they are. But also the tote bag's pretty thick, and so we'll really test the strength of these machines and see how well they stand out. On top of testing heavyweight fabric, we also want to test how these machines perform with knit. So we'll sew a boxy tee. This is a special, unique design that features drop shoulders and a wider, boxier body for that streetwear look. If you want to get into sewing or learn how to sew online, whether it's a t-shirt, a hoodie, cargo pants, or jeans, I highly recommend these kits. When I first started sewing, it was tough trying to find high quality fabrics that match patterns and then having to go to different shops to collect all the pieces. It's a bit of a nightmare. So I've simplified that for you by creating these DIY kits, which includes everything. All you gotta do is open it up, press play on the tutorial, and then I'll walk you through all the steps so beginners who are sewing for the first time can sew their own clothes. We've already got enough DIY kits to sew a full handmade outfit, and the collection is still growing, so check them out in the links below. The Singer I've used in my tutorial video, and it works great. There's no problems. It takes a heavy load easily, thick fabric, no problem at all. For the Brother, it was super convenient that it came with the walking foot and the double needle, which was clutch for sewing the boxy tee. I didn't actually need any stabilizer when I was sewing with knit material, which is a plus. The downside was when I was doing the tote bag, it's very thick material, and when I got to the thickest part where the woven strap meets the canvas and they're all folded together, I did have to give it a bit of a lift when I was approaching that hump to get it over. You could kind of hear the machine working, and you could kind of tell you had to be more gentle when you're on this heavyweight project. So it pulled through, it did it, but you do have to be a little bit more mindful about how far you push this machine. For the Janome, when I was sewing the boxy tee, I realized that you can actually fine tune the stretch stitch setting a little bit more than other machines, and that's just a nice feature to have. I didn't really love not having the ability to adjust the pressure foot pressure, especially when I'm working with different fabrics like knit. But what I did like was the foot pedal was really smooth. And when it was operating, the sound of the machine sounds very strong, like it's got the torque. And that was clear when I was sewing the tote bag. I had no issues going through the thickest part of the tote bag. Now remember, this ranking is just based off of these 3 machines. I know that each brand has more robust models available, probably at a higher price, but for this sample size, there's a reason to choose either of them based on who you are. Quilters are gonna love the Brother machine, and it's because it comes with a walking foot, it comes with an extra wide table, and it comes with 37 stitches, many which are decorative stitches. And because it comes with all these different features right out of the box, it actually makes me think this model was made for quilters. If you plan on sewing clothes from scratch, then that's where I would think you'd find a best friend in the Singer 4423. Because it's able to work with a wide range of fabrics, so you can work with lightweight, heavyweight, and because it's a heavy duty machine, you can feel assured when you're working with something like denim or cotton canvas. And that automatic buttonhole feature, it's a no-brainer, it's clutch for sewing clothes. That's where I'd go with the Singer. Also, if you're thinking of doing upholstery, predominantly you're probably gonna be working with heavyweight fabrics. That's where the heavy duty, again, the 4423 model comes clutch. But if you don't think you're gonna need the buttonholes when you're upholstering items, then maybe you can go with the 4411. For home tailoring, this is typically someone who pulls out their sewing machine maybe once a quarter, every now and then, to adjust clothes that just don't fit right. Whether it's making pants a bit shorter by adjusting the hem or tapering it to make it a bit slimmer, shirts, pants, hoodies, or patching up holes or tears. That's where I'd probably go with the most affordable option, which is the Brother. And even if you do end up working with some heavyweight fabrics, you're probably only going to be working with a fraction of the garment, and as long as you're gentle, mindful of its limits, some light use, this will be perfectly fine. For a thrift flipper, I find the use case to be pretty similar to a home tailor, working with a range of fabrics and also messing around with old clothes. And that's where I think a lightweight, affordable machine will do just fine. But if you know you're going to be using the machine very often and you want something that's going to handle anything you throw at it, then that's where I'd go with the Singer Heavy Duty. It's just so reliable, and the price is similar to the other comparables that this is the reason why the Singer Heavy Duty 4423 takes the crown as the best machine for beginners. So if you feel confident, cop a machine, and then check out my next video in the series, Essential Tools You Need to Start Sewing. And until next time, peace.